Będziesz używać tego mikrofonu? Myślę, że tak.
Should I use the microphone or will it run this unit? Or
Yes.
I think it would be okay.
yeah, because you don't have like live streaming or something that I have to use the microphone.
You have live streaming, but your microphone should be on.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think it's working.
Okay. Great. Yep, working. Yeah, this is. Yeah, it's working. Okay.
So, good morning everybody to the first session, talk session of the talk days of the conference. The conference started 2 days ago with tutorials. We had 2 days of great tutorials, and now we have 2 days of great talks. And we have a session about environmental science in the broader sense. And Jakub is starting with machine learning in protecting bees from being poisoned, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, all yours.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm Jakub from the Machine Learning and Chemoinformatics Lab here at the Faculty of Computer Science at AGH, and the talk is about ecotoxicology and bee toxicity prediction using machine learning. So let's get started. Firstly, a very, very short intro into what are molecules, what are drugs, what is chemistry, right? So we are on the same page. So chemically, molecules are typically small compounds. So when you think about chemistry, what we typically work on with machine learning are small molecules, right? Not many atoms, not much of the molecular weight, typically under 50 to 100 atoms in terms of what we do, what we synthesize, what we ship to clients. Molecules are ingested in living organisms, they are transported to cells in living organisms, and they bind to proteins, they affect an organism through affecting the proteins which regulate how organisms work. So mathematically, we can see the molecules as undirected but attributed graphs, where we have atoms, we have bonds, we can describe them in some way. They are non-Euclidean combinatorial structures, right? They are not vectors, they are not arrays. We have to process them in some way that takes into consideration that those are molecules. So, proteins. Proteins are biomolecules. Proteins are yeah, maybe we'll try another microphone. Okay. Sorry for technical difficulties. Better? Hopefully it will be better. So proteins. Proteins are biomolecules, larger biomolecules, right? They are built from amino acids, so we typically don't process them at the level of individual atoms, but rather see them as larger structures, and they perform very diverse functions in our bodies. Basically, they build our bodies, they regulate the processes, they catalyze the reactions in our bodies. If you want to affect what happens inside the living organism, you typically want to affect a protein that does something. And they have very complex interactions with other things, particularly small molecules, which means that we can make a small molecule and make it affect a protein. And we do this by a protein-ligand binding. So we basically make a small molecule, which is called a ligand, and we bind it. It binds to a protein. We design it so it binds to a protein, and thus regulates its functions. So it typically either inhibits or excites the protein. So it either inhibits what proteins does, it stops it. For example, stop the inflammatory reaction. That's how drugs work. Or excite it, so make it happen. They work on a key-log pair basis. So we basically design a small molecule that fits inside the protein in so-called binding pocket, and it affects how the protein works. So that's what we want to do. We want to design ligands that bind to proteins and that do what we want to do by affecting the protein. So in terms of agrochemistry, going into more specific details in terms of this presentation, we typically design pesticides. It's a huge business. We all use pesticides in agrochemistry because they kill agricultural pests, so they basically increase the yield of your crops. We have, for example, herbicides that kill weeds, insecticides that kill insects, fungicides that kill parasitic fungi. So we want to design those pesticides. They are the most common type of agrochemicals. And they can be systemic, which kill everything. This is basically a bioweapon at that point. We don't want to use them that much anymore. I mean, literal bioweapons were also used as pesticides. but we nowadays prefer the selective pesticides that kill just the organism that we want to kill. Like, for example, a very specific group or species of pests. An example, maybe not a great example, is the glyphosate. So glyphosate is, it's common, a very common herbicide, but not very selective. For example, Roundup. You may recognize it, it's a very commonly used herbicide. So how glyphosate works is that it inhibits the enzyme protein, the EPSP synthase. It's found only in plants. So, for example, it won't bind to anything in humans. And it blocks something called the Shikimate pathway. It's basically a protein making, another protein making, another protein, which basically creates crucial amino acids that plants are required to have to build their cells. So once you block this protein, you inhibit it, you block the pathway, plants basically wilt and die because they can't build themselves. Right? So that's what we want to do. But in terms of designing new agrochemicals, so how to arrive at this new ligand that you want to produce, that you want to patent, that you want to sell. So computer-aided drug design is very much used in pharmaceutical industry. It's extremely common. Every pharma company does this with virtual screening, molecular property prediction, computational processing, generative AI models lately. We do all those things. But in agrochemistry, it's surprisingly old-fashioned. So basically what agrochemists will do, for example, is to go out, take a few fields of crops, grow them, wait half a year, and gather results. So it takes obviously a lot of time because you have to actually grow the thing, right? Or for example, if you want to check the toxicity of something, what we do as toxicologists is basically to kill 50% of test organisms and check how much was required to kill 50%. For example, if you want to check the toxicity to honeybees, you take, for example, 100 and check how much of your new pesticide is required to kill the 50% of your bees. So obviously there are some ethical concerns, like for example killing dozens of organisms each time. So we don't want to do that. We want to use machine learning in silico based methods to limit the lab experiments due to all those concerns. But it's surprisingly hard in practice because arguably designing new pesticides in environmental sciences is much harder than in pharmaceutical industry designing drugs. Because in organisms, you have a lot of constraints in terms of very different organisms in terms of evolution. Because in humans, you have, well, humans, right? We are one organism. But in ecotoxicology, you not only want effectiveness of the pesticide, you want your pesticide to be deadly. You want it to kill things. But at the same time, you want it to be safe to bees, to earthworms, to birds, to fish, to algae, to all the organisms that are relevant ecologically. So you want to kill one thing, but not kill a lot of different things. And those things are very, very different in terms of evolution, right? In terms of how they are built, what proteins they have in their own organisms. We also have human safety, long-term effects, a lot of concerns. So as part of work, because machine learning is not yet used very widely in this area, so I say somewhat initial research in this area, we created the APISTOX dataset, and this will be the second part of this presentation. So how to do computational processing and creating the molecular datasets. So APISTOX dataset is described in this publication, QR code and scientific data publication link if you are interested in details. Also shout out to my colleagues Jakub Poziemski and Paweł Siedlecki, who are much better chemists than I am. I am a computer scientist, but I will try to do computer science in this presentation. So honeybees, Apis mellifera, are crucial pollinators. We like honey, we like pollinators, because otherwise we have to pollinate ourselves by hand. Not nice. And also they are a regulatory organism. So this means that if you want to make money, if you want to make a new pesticide, you have to show that your pesticide is not too toxic to honeybees. And also existing pesticides are being retired because those requirements are getting stronger and stronger each evaluation, particularly in European Union. So we have to show during the design phase that our pesticide will not be very toxic to honeybees to make it to the market, right? So we want to do machine learning in silico-based computational methods to reduce lab experiments in the meantime, right? To predict this. So APISTOX dataset answers the crucial problem in machine learning that you have to learn from some, right? You have to have some data. And actually getting high quality data in chemistry is very, very hard. In terms of standardizing structures, in terms of gathering data, also merging different lab measurements, because every lab does this slightly differently. Also, you have living bees, and they sometimes, for example, don't want to die. So you have a lot of uncertainty in terms of your measurements. You have to do experiment many times. You have to merge the results. And API-STOCKS is the largest in terms of the number of molecules, the unique molecules that we have. And as you can see on the slide, actually the number of molecules is not that large. API-STOCKS is over 1,000 molecules, and this is all we have. Right? In terms of machine learning, it's not a lot, 1,000 data points, because each molecule has another data point for prediction. So the core data is the molecular structure written as SMILE string. If you don't know this format, it's okay. Just know that molecular structures can be written in text form. You can write them in a database. You don't have to store it as a graph per se. And you have the toxicity label, whether it's too toxic or not too toxic to honeybees. Because actually regulatory organs recognize that we have a lot of uncertainty in lab measurements. So instead of regression, so predicting like continuous values, we do classification, whether it's too toxic or not too toxic. That is totally normal. We have some thresholds for toxicity, whether it's above or below the threshold. So API-STOCKS is of particularly high quality, and this is what we want to took us over 1,000 lines of pandas code to actually ensure the quality, to do the pre-processing, to do the duplication, and the duplication of graphs is incredibly hard, even in chemistry where we have constraints. Standardized structure, so each is represented in the same way with some additional metadata. So private data sets have problems. For example, invalid entries, the second line here, those are entries that throw an error in Python when you try to read them. Or for example, duplicates. So you have the same molecule written many times. Here, for example, in Bitox AI, almost 1/3 of the datasets are duplicates. So not good. It really inflates the results of predictive algorithms when you try to test them. And so how do the data records look like? So we have SMILE strings, like the above. They are very cheap, very short, cheap to store in a dataset. Just hard to get. Then we can construct the molecular graphs from them. We can do machine learning on this part, and then predict the labels, whether it's too toxic or not too toxic. Also, we have a bit of metadata. Fetching it was not that easy, even for 1,000 data points. Actually, chemists would definitely benefit from attending this conference and some Python knowledge, because the chemical APIs are not good in terms of reliability. But we managed to get those different metadata parts. And in terms of workflow, we have a very long workflow that I won't go into exact details, because we have 1,000 lines of pandas for grouping, for the duplicating, for standardizing this. But basically, if you want to take multiple data sources, the first thing that you have to do is standardize them, to bring them into the same format. For example, EcoTox database is publicly available. It's a great database, but the major problem with EcoTox is that it contains single lab measurements. So for example, for a given pesticide, you can have 1,000 numbers, and you have to aggregate it into a single label, too toxic or not too toxic. So actually, this was a lot of work, but the entire code is open source on GitHub. You can just take it and apply this to any other ecotoxicology endpoint, and it should just work out of the box with poetry setup in Python. So it should be pretty easy to run on other targets, and that's what we are doing right now in further research. So dataset statistics, it's moderately imbalanced, with majority of pesticides not too toxic to honeybees. Makes sense, because they are used in practice. Some are too toxic. Actually, those are in major bioweapons that have been repurposed by pesticides, but they are delegalized now. But we have quite a lot of toxic molecules. We want to predict this. And number of pesticides has grown over time, but not too much. We have about 1,000 right now, so not a lot in terms of machine learning. And to do machine learning, we have to do train and test splits, right? To test and train on some parts of the data. Actually, getting the test data right in chemistry is pretty hard, because we have to have the test set that contains molecules that are structurally different from the training ones. Because if you want to create a new pesticide, you have to patent it. If you can't patent it, you won't make any money out of it, but you can only patent novel structures. It has to be sufficiently different from existing molecules. So we have to make sure that our test set contains molecules that are very different from the training data. It's called out-of-distribution testing in machine learning, and it's pretty hard to do. So we especially on pesticides because they are often salts. So if you have a salt in chemistry, you have two components of a graph that are disconnected. You have two parts of molecule that are bound together but not connected by an edge. So it's pretty hard to work on this data. So we proposed two splits. I think the time split is more easily explainable. So basically what we did was to take a chemical API and check what was the first date that pesticide appeared in the literature. So basically check what was the first mention of each substance at all in some paper. At least a patent, because you have to patent it. It actually works pretty well because this way, without labels, without the actual date of measurement, we can approximate the time of production of different pesticides. I think this is a pretty powerful approach that not many machine learning people use, but I think it's pretty powerful to just use external APIs to add this time metadata. So going into machine learning, sorry, we don't have much time, so I'll be skipping on over.
I missed the mistake. You have more time.
I have more time.
Yeah.
Great, incredible.
My bad, so sure.
Yeah, incredible. So we can go back to this slide. Because I think the second very interesting thing, I think for many machine learning people, is that molecular data is naturally clustered with similar points. Because what chemists do is they take a molecule and modify some parts of this molecule. They take the core, called also the scaffold, but rather molecules, for example, modify functional groups or modify the salt structure. So bind two different things together. And we recognize this. And the problem with using the random split on this data is that you can have very similar molecules and train and test data sets that, for example, have only functional groups modified. So what we proposed is using the maximum split. It actually is based on the maximum diversity picking problem. In MDP problem, this is a general problem in computer science. In MDP problem, you want to select from a set of n items, for example, your data set, a subset of k items, for example, your test set, that is maximally diverse, so that your test items have the highest possible sum of pairwise distances between them. So basically, what this means in terms of geometry is that your test set will uniformly cover the entire chemical space. If you could draw this in 2 dimensions, your test set would be uniformly distributed across this area. So in maximum split, you actually test very well throughout all the different chemical structures in your chemical space. And I think it's a pretty powerful approach. Basically, it should work in any machine learning application, and I haven't seen many works using that. So I encourage you to try. I have seen pretty good results with that. So going into machine learning, finally, because we have the data, it's high quality, it's duplicated, it's pre-processed, it has train test and test set, so we can do machine learning. So another publication, this is a preprint, awaiting the review right now, also just using machine learning on API stocks and a lot of explainable AI, which I won't be showing here because I think it goes into chemical details that I don't know much about, but chemists assure me that it works. But in terms of machine learning, I will be going more into details here. So we take API stocks, we take those splits that we have seen before, time split and maximum split, to test our algorithms in 2 slightly different ways, and have a wide variety of machine learning methods. I think it's really important that we don't fixate on like one type of algorithms, but rather check many different algorithms and then explain it with explainable AI to understand if our algorithms really work. So in terms of machine learning methods, firstly some baselines. I won't be going into much details because they are, I think, very chemically relevant and would require more knowledge. But in terms of molecular fingerprints, I think those are very general algorithms, because molecular fingerprints really are feature extraction algorithms. They are graph algorithms that basically look at a molecular graph, they extract subgraphs of a particular shape, for example, shortest paths or graph walks or circular neighborhoods on a graph. They extract all the subgraphs from a molecule and then hash them onto a vector. So as you can see here, we take a molecule, then decompose it into subgraphs. So check all the subgraphs of a given shape, then translate them as integers onto a vector. It's basically making a dictionary on a vector. Basically, we assign a numerical identifier, an integer to all those subgraphs, and then do the modulo function to hash this onto a vector. So this is a very simple approach. I mean, in coding Python, coding this fingerprint from scratch would take like a dozen lines or something. But it really works well in chemistry. It's very commonly used. We also developed an open source library to do this in scikit-learn interface, scikit fingerprints. So here's a QR code. Please give us a star on GitHub. A small aside, do you know that stars on GitHub are really relevant to Google search? If you want to develop an open source library, actually Google started indexing us at 100 GitHub stars. So this may be relevant to you if you do open source development. GitHub stars are relevant. So we basically extract those fingerprints, put them into a random forest classifier, and then it should work. Secondly, graph kernels, slightly more mathematical because they do pairwise comparison of molecular graphs. Those are very flexible algorithms that project the graphs into a high-dimensional metric space using something called reproducing kernel Hilbert spaces. It's a pretty advanced math, but in short, you take a graph and it translates it into a point in a very high-dimensional space where your algorithms are mathematically supposed to work very well in terms of classification. Then we use graph neural networks, a very hot topic in computer science, where you take a graph and you do message passing. So basically, nodes talk to each other, talk to their neighbors by exchanging vectors with their features. This is called graph convolution. And you can do this in a bunch of different ways. We do those networks to learn end-to-end graph representations of neural networks. And then we use some pre-trained embeddings, because on graphs pre-training is very, very hard, but we try to use some pre-trained models to extract embeddings. You take a pre-trained neural network, vectorize a graph, so a molecule goes in, a vector goes out, and then you do machine learning on those embeddings with a bunch of different models. And we have a lot of results. Of course, we have those huge tables that I won't be going over because we have like a lot of results. The paper is like 30 pages. But summarizing this, also because we don't have that much time. Surprisingly, despite what we expected, actually, in terms of MCC metric, molecular fingerprints turned out to give the best results, not neural networks. I think this is a very relevant for all life sciences. We have small data. We don't have many pesticides. Chemistry is very limited in terms of what you can do experimentally. So you don't have much data for machine learning, and this means that actually simpler baselines that are not neural networks can actually work very, very well because we have limited data. And those neural networks failed a lot. We explain this also in the paper in more detail, but generally speaking, molecular fingerprints, graph kernels, those simpler methods work very, very well with limited data. And I think it's very important to at least try them. And those results are also, there are also two explanations, possible other explanations. Firstly, that pre-training neural networks is hard. Secondly, that they are just maxing out benchmarks, right? You write a machine learning paper, you max out the benchmark. They are typically from medicinal chemistry. You max out the benchmark, you push out the paper. And the algorithm doesn't work in the future, but you have the paper, right? It's not a positive thing, don't do that, but people do that. And also because agrochemistry is very different from medicinal chemistry. We have different, for example, pesticides are toxic, right? By design, they need to kill things. In medicinal chemistry, those things are supposed to be safe in all instances. So obviously there's a difference here, and I think it's a really huge field for development of machine learning. To do more machine learning in environmental sciences rather than just medicinal chemistry. Some last takeaways, agrochemistry is great, absolutely do that. I think there's definitely not enough science there. We need more benchmarks, especially in terms of agrochemistry. We are working on that right now. And neural networks for molecules are also not that great. All their methods are often more reliable when you have limited data. So also keep that in mind. Sorry, I had to skim over some details, but also read the papers and you can talk to me after the talk. And thank you for attention. You have the QR code for my LinkedIn if you want to ask questions after the conference. And I hope you like the presentations, and I welcome some questions.
First question?
So the way how I understood it worked is you take those fingerprints of the molecule, and that's what you submit to the model.
Yeah.
So when you do studies on the key. So the question is, when we look at the molecules binding proteins, usually we're not only concerned with how the molecule looks like, we're also interested in how the pocket looks like. And since you're not targeting one single species of Homo sapiens in this case, you're looking at so many different species, I was wondering if you would consider, or if you have looked at how do the structures of those protein pockets look like in different species of insects, or anything else that you want to target.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting question and a very good question. And the slight problem is that we often in agrochemistry do not know the binding pockets of the proteins. In fact, some pesticides work on the assumption that, oh, I have seen that this kills organisms. I do not know how this works, but it works, and I will use it. So actually, for many pesticides, we do know that they are, for example, are toxic or not toxic. We know the structure of the ligand because we synthesize it, but we don't know the protein. In many cases, and it's very hard in many cases to observe, much harder than for humans. We don't have, for example, good mathematical models or cell models for that. So it's definitely challenging.
Another question? First, yeah.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I'm wondering, and I'm a bit puzzled with this way to encode the whole molecule into a vector. For instance, there is one element, HO, that is a bit on the left and on the right, in the second subgraph and in the last subgraph. And these elements go to the same cell, and there is encoded one. Why not two?
Great question. So actually, this depends on the choice of the algorithm. This is something called binary fingerprint, where you ignore the hashing collisions. If two things get assigned to the single index, you ignore them and you assign one, right? This basically ignores the hashing collisions. Obviously, it loses information, right? But it works surprisingly well in many cases. This is called a binary fingerprint. But we could also count them up, right? We could add and mark 2 on this colliding index. Absolutely, this is called a count fingerprint. If you are interested, look at our library. We have a host of tutorials and explanations which go into more details on that.
I have a question about the test set, how you create it, and I thought it was very interesting, right? That slide. And you say you use the newest 20% in the test set. Would this not also mean that they are lacking in the train set? Because the newest might be also very interesting. So would it maybe be better to use like a fraction of the newest 20% so you also still have it in the train set? Because otherwise you might train a model that doesn't have the newest things in it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. If I understand correctly, so what we are doing in the paper, we are training on 80% of the data, testing on the 20%, right? But if you want to actually train the model and deploy it for the future, right? In the future, you want to predict for new pesticides. In the future, we would retrain it on all of the data, right? What we do in machine learning, because I'm also working apart of being a scientist, what we do is we train on some data, test on some data. This is the assumed performance of our algorithm, but if you want to deploy to production, if you want to use the algorithm, we will retrain it on all of the data that we have. And this retrained algorithm gets deployed. Because this way, you are right that if we didn't use the test data, we would basically lose 20% of our data that wouldn't be used for training. So we want to test our algorithm. This is the assumed performance. But if we want to deploy this algorithm in the future, we will retrain on everything.
But if you do that, how do you know that you are not overfitting?
This is the problem.
Okay.
This is absolutely the problem. It's a huge topic in computer science. I have seen many different approaches to that. It's a hard problem how to retrain, what to deploy. Yeah.
We have 2 minutes. Another question? Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I just have a question. What is this last metric in the last table, the MCC?
MCC actually is a really nice metric. It's called matrix correlation coefficient. And what MCC is basically Pearson correlation on binary vectors. It's a fancy name, but basically you take predictions 0, 1s, ground truth 0, 1s, and you calculate the linear correlation between them. So MCC is pretty nice because the baseline value, if your algorithm is basically randomly performing, is 0, and the maximum value is 1. And if your algorithm was confidently wrong, it would be negative. But yeah, MCC is a really nice metric. There are a bunch of papers that show really good mathematical properties of this metric, particularly from imbalanced data, which we have here, slightly imbalanced. Okay, yeah, perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. We still have a minute. We have a question there for machine, because you say that the machine learning doesn't perform as well as the others. Can you combine it? Like there's something called physical-based machine learning. So when they calculate derivatives, they don't just use any mathematics. They use physically-based mathematics. So would it be a possibility to combine these methods? So when you use machine learning, you use some of the other methods and use this information they provide for your machine learning? Can you combine it in some way or the other?
Yeah, so in a way we can do that, because in chemistry we can actually do feature extraction. We can calculate some features that we know that are relevant to the problem and that are input to the machine learning models, but they are highly informative. We know that from chemistry for the problem. Like for example, we know that if you want to get to the protein, you have to have really reasonable hydrophobicity. So your protein has to not bind to the water or to fat too much. So for example, you can calculate the approximate hydrophobicity and input this as a chemical knowledge or physical knowledge, because it's a physical measure really, to your model, so that informs its features. So yeah, we can incorporate this as a feature extraction basically, and it works really well.
Thank you very much. Big applause for our speaker. So now we have 5 minutes to change rooms. If you really want to go to the other talk and leave this very good, nice session here about environmental things, then it's your chance. Maybe we get somebody from there, and in 5 minutes we continue with the next talk. So we have 5 minutes to change computers. Right? Thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So.
I have tested it, yes.
Right. You still have my adapter?
Yeah, I have.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Thanks for sharing it.
I will have another.
Yeah. Can I just get
Yeah. If the laptop is the same, it's like this.
Yeah, I think they keep on reducing these.
Real man, etc. That's the thing. You have to agree with all.
Yeah, I know. So it says there is no internet, no connection. So the Wi-Fi signal is there, but there is no. Yeah, I tried. Okay. Should I restart? Sorry? I will try
See, it has stopped working again. It has stopped working again.
Yeah, you click that one. Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
Did it change the screen there?
Yeah, it's getting it here in the laptop. It says mirroring.
Okay.
But I think it needs to change the input to it somehow.
Yeah. Maybe we need to. We have two. We have they're not out of options yet. We have so many options.
I think he pressed on this button last time.
Yeah, we are on the right. We're on the right screen already. So input. And then we have to press this button.
Hopefully it does. No.
I'm not sure if it's here.
It is here on my laptop, so
Yeah.
it's here. It's not changing here.
So I don't know where to point to. Because it's the input is correct already.
I think input is.
Yeah, because otherwise you would because this
Yeah.
this is video conference. So that's what we want. So and then we have to press this button. Do you have any idea? If we press this button, it will. So, but probably need to point it somewhere.
Shall I call the guy?
Yeah. We are just stupid to press buttons. So. Yeah, if you press this button,
Yeah.
then work. But I don't know what else.
Yeah, this is like they were standing in front of the maybe the sensor somewhere there. I'm not sure.
I don't know about the sensor because I'm not sure if this is for this machine or because it's a video conference. There's for something else, some other sensor. Yeah.
Maybe it's up there, but that's
Because he was just standing here and pressed the button. Ah, yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
we know where to stand.
I just kept pressing the button until it worked. I brute forced it by pressing 100 times.
Yeah, it's done. Thank you.
It worked now, but of course I pressed and pressed and pressed and pressed and then it worked. Press the same thing again.
Is it okay if I can skip the mic and speak loudly?
I'm not sure how it is for recording.
Oh, okay, wait. That makes sense. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, it's time. So this yours. That's mine. Okay, we will continue our session about environment. And from these we go to see the seabed and the ocean, I guess. And we, of course, we use Python and machine learning, what else, to investigate what's happening there. It's all yours.
Thank you, Mike. Morning, guys. I am Samar Dachkepi. I'm a geoscientist, unlike the previous presenter who was a computer scientist. And I use Python for subsea engineering workflows. So I'm going to talk about Python for subsea engineering, and I'm going to present a case study on seabed object detection. Typically, I use this work for installation of giant offshore wind farms or laying subsea pipelines. But today, don't worry, I'm not going to talk a lot about subsea engineering. Moreover, I'm going to give you a glimpse of how do we use these workflows and why this is important. I'm showing you a picture of coral AUV from Australian Institute for Marine Sciences. And why this picture? Because look at these corals. They're beautiful, they're stunning. And it's essentially a drone that measures the coral health and works on optical imaging. But today, we're going to work on something else, which is acoustic imaging or sonars. So here is the roadmap of our dive, pun fully intended. I'm going to give you a dip into the subsea exploration, and we will talk about how do sonar images look like, what does the seabed look like, and then I'm going to walk you through a workflow for object detection in sonar images. I'll then share some examples on how well or not the AI works, and then I'm going to wrap it up with a summary of what we have talked and a peek into the future. What lies for subsea engineering and where we are headed. This is what your seabed objects look like on a sonar image. So you can see you have a lot of wrecks, Titanic, laying there at the bottom of the Atlantic for a century now. You have airplane wrecks. We cannot forget Malaysian Airlines 370, where sonar was used for finding out what happened to the airplane. We have drowning victims, unfortunate. We have mines, and we have variable seabed. Now, this is quite important because this seabed, this is the marine habitat. It's where the life form exists, and we need to understand it before we do any kind of intervention in the seabed. So this is what we use AI for. Why do we need to use this? Why can't we pick it ourselves? So think about this problem as this. So here we are mapping the marine habitat with sonar images. We are in shallow waters, 10 meter deep off the coast of Germany. And this is quite important because all the subsea operations are quite important to protect coastal biodiversity before you get any permissions to build an offshore wind farm or to lay a pipeline. You need to know you're not disturbing any fragile marine life. So here, this is a small experiment where we are using it for 25 by 25 meter area, and the detection size is quite small. You can see it is in centimeters. So think about it, if we are developing an offshore wind farm or if we are mapping out a large area to understand its biodiversity, it's difficult than finding a needle in the haystack. So we are look at the scales, kilometers of area, you're looking for objects which are centimeters in size. Now, you can put a manual, geoscientist like me can work on hours on it. It is time consuming, it's laborious, it's subjective. It depends on a lot of factors, especially if I had an argument with my partner over the color of cartons. I may not be able to pick those small objects. I think, leave it. It doesn't matter. So, what does it look like? So you can see here, this is an optical image or a video footage of what your seabed looks like. And here, the same image on acoustic image, a sonar image. So what you see on a sonar image as a shadow is exactly this. Is it the home of some marine life forms? And that's why it is quite important to pick this out, to map them out across the seabed, across the area of interest. But there are some challenges with doing this kind of work. There is, first of all, there is lack of local data. You can see the survey has been properly done, has missed a lot of it. And it happens a lot, especially in marine habitat surveying or when you are surveying for offshore wind farm, because you don't want to spend a lot of money into it, essentially, before making a huge investment. You have no resolution, you have noise in it. You may have some linear noise due to acquisition artifacts. You might have survey artifacts like here. You have variable seabed. You might have clean seabed, clean sandy seabed like a beach. And somewhere you might have gravel beds. And then you have artifacts due to merging data along different survey lines. So you do survey across different lines and you merge them and you see a lot of problems. So there are two key points which are important for deploying a machine learning model in such kind of data. Which is first, scarcity of large, diverse and well-annotated data sets. You cannot predict geology, geomorphology. So that's the one. And the second one is manual annotation is expertise intensive process. So how do we do that? How do we overcome this problem? We use AI to work on it. So here I'm showcasing you a small workflow, a simple workflow for sonar object detection. So we have got the sonar data. Now these sonar data are quite large. You can have TBs of data across squares, hundreds of squares of kilometers if you are deploying an offshore wind farm. So you have to you have to go with a systematic way to process this kind of data for machine learning. So what you essentially do, you tile this data and you cluster it. Why do you cluster it? Because you want to have, different kind of seabed conditions. So you want to cluster similar conditions. So you want your machine learning model to handle it properly, to train properly, and to generalize properly. And this goes into a CNN model. Here you train its weights and do all the fancy things. You take it, you get the prediction from the CNN model, and now you are georeferencing your predictions. You're taking them from image space, pixel space, to coordinate space, which is a real world coordinate space for your sonar survey. So essentially, your machine learning model does not work on coordinate systems, it works on pixel based, so you have to bring it back to it. And once you have got it, before you send all of these predictions to the client to build any infrastructure or to get the environmental consent, it is done by an expert QC. As geoscientist sits and validates each and every point. Now this is quite important because we want to know, are there any misclassification? Have we missed any stones or boulders or any objects there? So this is quite important. Now let's deep dive into how do we do it. So here is a small example of how do we tile this sonar data before training. So we're using GDAL retile functionality here. We are making sure that we have all the target directories. We do a command line call for GDAL retile, and then we are defining what is our tile size. So it depends on your data. If you have cleaner seabed with very low density of objects, you can get away with or larger low density of seabeds, very sparse density of objects, very sparse objects. So you can go, you can get away with a large tile size. And but if you have smaller objects of centimeter scale, so you might want to reduce your tile size. So more the smaller the tile size, the more the data to process. And then you can overlap as well, because it might be possible there might be a boulder here which is at the edge of it, and you want to capture it, so you want to overlap the tiles, and you can define it there. Once you have done that, you do an efficient data set preparation, which is training versus validation. So you get your tiles, you name your tiles, you name your files, and then you use it to split it into, depending on your validation ratio. We're using 80-20 here, so we can use this, using this percentage, we can divide our tiles, we can move the tiles along with the corresponding bounding boxes or your ground truth into separate folders for training and validation. And then we can translate geospatial data into pixel space or pixel space to coordinate space once we have got the predictions. So you get your geospatial boundaries here of an image tile. You are thinking, what is my image boundary in real coordinate systems, and then you take for each point here in your coordinate space or in your image space, you're linking it to each other. Now this is what here it's doing, and then you store the annotations. You store class name. What is it? Is it a drowning victim? Is it a mine? Is it a stone? Is it a wreck? Your image name, your pixel, X and Y. Now it depends on what kind of model you're using. If you're using, let's say, a FastR CNN, it would be different. For a YOLO, it would be different. Now, the next step is teaching the model to recognize objects from any angle. Now, sonar survey happens where a ship or a autonomous underwater vehicle will go along different directions to capture the whole area. And once you do that, so the orientation of these stones would change depending on which direction the survey has happened. So what you want to do, you can rotate these images, and you can teach the machine learning model that you have to pick boulders. A boulder might look different depending on how it has been picked up, because if you think about insonification, just like sun goes around, and as it goes around, our shadow moves. It's the same thing happens in sonar as well. It's the same principle. So here are your predictions. So you've done everything. You got these images. Now, if you look at these images, you will see that it doesn't work really well. It works well in certain cases. It doesn't work in certain cases. And I expect it, because it has not been trained properly on a vast amount of data. So what it works well on, for example, you might see there are some tiles where you have a very clean seabed with a boulder there, it picks it up, but it might fail somewhere else as well. For example, here or here as well. You might see that this is a gravel bed. This is a gravel bed. So there is this boulder lying on top of the gravel bed. It becomes very difficult for a machine learning model, if not properly fine-tuned properly, to pick boulders in such complex areas. Now, there is another interesting thing here. If you look at this tile and you see a mark across the tile, you know what it is? In the last glacial maximum, when you had ice age and you had glaciers retreating from Central Europe to the north, so these icebergs, they acted like plows and they etched these marks at the seabed. So it is able to pick up boulders there as well, which is quite interesting. Now this is good. This is a high resolution data. Let me show you what if we do not have this kind of high resolution. So we tried an experiment. What we did, we decimated this data. So this is what your data would look like when you are thinking of whether are we going to build an offshore wind farm or are we going to lay a pipeline. So are we going to invest any money into it? So we don't go with a very high resolution image, we go with a low resolution image. So essentially what we did, we applied some super resolution methods. So it is enhanced super resolution generative adversarial networks. So what we did, we took it off the shelf, trained it on some high resolution data and tried to apply it on this decimated image of low resolution noisy image. And you say it doesn't work really well. So what we did, we fine-tuned it. Now it performs much better than what it has been before. So what matters is, what is quite important. So when essentially all these machine learning models have been trained on benchmark dataset, which are optical images, not acoustic images. Now once you do this transformation from optical imaging to acoustic imaging, how well do these frameworks work? And this shows us that if we fine-tune a model properly, we are able to make this transfer learning properly. Now this is the machine learning part. Now this goes to the expert QC. A geoscientist sits and validates each of it. So we have different methods to do that. Now this has to be done by a team of geoscientists, so it has to be a collaborative QC of large object detection datasets in GIS. Now let me give you a number for it. You can have up to 500,000 boulders in BC Wind offshore wind farm off the coast of Gdansk. So 500,000 boulders being validated by geoscientists manually is a huge task. So here AI is able to replace that laborious task of going everywhere across the image picking these boulders. It gives us the images, it gives us the predictions, and then we go out and validate these boulders. Now we can use it different ways. We can use SQLite, especially it works with small data set. If you are working with offshore wind farm off the coast of Norwich in UK, where you might have over 50 square kilometers, you might have 20 stones to pick. Works good. But what about BC Wind offshore wind farm off the coast of Gdansk? Doesn't work. So you need more collaboration and efficient QC. So what we have three options. We can go with SQLite, we can go with PostgreSQL. The problem with this, a geoscientist doesn't see it. It's a good backend. It gives a lot of flexibility. But the best way for us that has worked out is QGIS and PostGIS. Now what it does, you can collaboratively QC, a team of geoscientists can work together. It is visual, intuitive, as I showed you in the last one. The geoscientist can see if it's a boulder or not, or stone or not. And it has a map-based review, which is great for a geoscientist to work on. So what delivers the more power is PostGIS handles the scale, 500,000 boulders. We are QCing these detections, so 5 geoscientists sitting together. I can find out who has reviewed this part of the boulders, so I can do efficient querying using PostGIS. QGIS, it empowers the geoscientist. We are visual. We look at boulders and we see, okay, this is what I'm seeing, and this is what a boulder will look like. So together they enable collaborative, efficient QC of massive detection datasets. Now, to bring it all together, we looked at sonar images. We saw that how AI is so efficient in picking these objects at seabed. But there is a catch. The catch is better data pre-processing. That means a better object detection, garbage in and garbage out. Now, another problem with doing this kind of work is acquisition of sonar data is costly and it's proprietary. Companies do not want to share it because they've spent so much money surveying the seabed. So how do we get the data? Machine learning problems are data problems, data-driven problems. So how do we solve it? So we can look out at different sectors like medical imaging, where we have come up with benchmark data sets. We have the Waymo open data set for self-driving cars. We need a shared anonymized benchmark data set to test out different machine learning models and see how well does it work. Then The models need to handle noisy, low-res sonar data and can be improved with super resolution fine-tuning. More work on that if we get proper benchmark data sets to see how do these models compare against each other. Now, one of the most important that happened, what the question was asked as well in the last presentation was, how do you retrain it? How do you retrain your models? So active learning loops, meaning detections reviewed by geoscientists can be fed back to retrain the models. You're using false positives and misdetections. Geoscientists understand what a boulder on a gravel bed looks like or on a plow mark looks like. So when the geoscientists review the predictions, they are able to see this is a misdetection, this is a misclassification, and this again goes back into the feedback loop to train the model, and we get pre-trained models. Now, at survey scale, detection are stored in geospatial databases. So large teams can efficiently QC and map seabed faster. Now, this is quite important because if we are going to spend millions of pounds or euros or dollars on developing an offshore engineering infrastructure, I would not trust the prediction from a black box machine learning model. I want surety, I want accuracy and reliability in my predictions. And this is what this stage is important. A human in the loop is important for accuracy and reliability of solving these kinds of problems. Now, where are we headed? We are headed towards that's the future. Now, this is EUV by Kraken Robotics, a Canadian company. This uses synthetic aperture sonars. Now, synthetic aperture sonars can have finer resolution. So once you have mapped your seabed, if you want to go more finer, you can use this kind of thing. You can just deploy them down. They will map the seabed for you and bring it back. You get a lot of data and you get less cost because you don't need a lot of people on the ship. The ship doesn't need to move along with the towfish, with the sonar, making rounds over a 50 square kilometer area. Fuel savings, less people on board. You can deploy it on the go. So high resolution sensors deployed through autonomous underwater vehicles. The second thing where the application of machine learning would work would be navigation and mapping. Now, these AVs need a lot of work in navigating around the seabed on itself, going around like a robovac goes in our homes to clean it up. So that needs to improve. And then the third one is onboard edge AI, near real-time inferences, meaning you develop a machine learning model, a lightweight machine learning frameworks, which can be deployed on these devices, and you can do near real-time inferences. There's another thing that is quite important. How do you transfer the data from EUV to the vessel, which is on floating? Now, we can use super resolution techniques where you compress the data at the EUV, you bring it up through acoustic modems, you bring it at the ship, and then you again unravel. You make it more high resolution. So, what is the future? Better sensors, smarter AI, and collaborative GIS workflows. Now, this would result into faster, more accurate, and more scalable subsea engineering workflows. Now, this work has been supported by a lot of AI research scientists like National Vision Center for Data, the base center at Edinburgh University. We work with the Vision Computing Group there. And most of this work has been developed open source. And by open source libraries, and which is cool to know that it's driving subsea innovation. So different frameworks and libraries, we know the names of all of them: PyTorch, Keras, Scikit-learn, NumPy, OpenCV, and the list goes on. They are open data sets, but they're quite small, not very representative. So from German BSH authority, from RVO, Dutch RVO, the Seabed Object KLSG dataset from China, they has helped to train some of these optical image based machine learning models to come to acoustic image, to solve problems in acoustic imaging. Now what it all highlights, it highlights collaboration, innovation and scalability. Now this is what makes this kind of work important. Thank you so much for hearing my thoughts here, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Hello, nice presentation. I have two questions. First of all, is that you said that you take data from different disciplines, like because optical data is not available inside the Voltron. So how do you annotate that data and how do you perform transfer learning on that data to train your models?
So essentially, if we look at these problems, anything that has been used in automatic target recognition and sonar images, which are acoustic images, in contrast to your optical images like your photographs. So most of your machine learning models have been trained on that, right? Segment anything model by Meta Research has been trained on millions of images because they are readily available as well. We post a lot of pictures on Instagram and Facebook, they can use it. So the transfer learning means these models, for example, a segment anything model, an unsupervised model, has been trained on these images to pick objects on these images. We apply these, we can take this model and use it on straight away on my sonar image. So what it does, it will pick up random things that it looks at. It will look at features like wherever there is a change in the grayscale intensity in the image, it will pick it up. Now, but it will not do a good job. Why? Because it has not been trained specially to look for objects, for example, shipwrecks. So what we have to do, we have to train it again, we have to retrain it. So segment anything model is a pre-trained model on optical images. We use it to pick up features on sonar images, which are also pixelated images. So this is the transfer learning, that you're taking what is there done in optical imaging, you're bringing it to acoustic image, and you again retraining this model, retraining the CNN layers to see this is what contrast would look like, this is where the histogram is changing, this is where the intensities are changing. So it is quite smart about it. So this is what means by transfer learning from one domain to another.
This is a technical question. So you're one of the lucky guys who got Cheetah installed, it looks like. But you calling this Python script as the command as a sub process was run. Why? Is there a special reason for this?
So what I'm showing you was a proof of concept. So I developed the proof of concept for the company.
Okay.
Worked on a small data set. Now I'm not a machine learning engineer.
Okay.
We are a small company. We are a startup. So we went out to National Innovation Center for Data to please help us out create a large framework to handle this kind of data. So this is what I'm showing you from there. I could not show you what we did with the base center or with these institutions because of confidentiality, but this one is work on purely on all the open source models, open source data. So I could show you it here. It could be recorded. That's why I'm showing you this work, and this I prefer using command line tools more. Yeah.
You know, because it's a Python script already, but you use Python to call another Python program. That's why I'm wondering. Yeah. Any more questions? More serious questions in mind? Yeah.
Sorry if I missed that in your presentation, but what kind of the industry is interested in the sonar images? Like I could imagine that maybe you need to know the ground under the sea if you want to build a fence on the sea, or maybe try to find the oil. Can you maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, so sonar can be used for military applications, tracking enemy vessels. You can do the same. It is used for mining, seabed mining, rare earth metals. At the seabed, and they would look exactly like this. The blobs of these rare earth metals on the seabed would look like this. It is used for offshore wind farms a lot. It is used for environmental consenting, so marine habitat mapping. So that's where it can be used. Apart from that, you have seen that it is used in if you're missing an airplane, if there are drowning victims, if you're finding shipwrecks, so marine archaeology sort of industry as well. So actually, the company that develops the AUVs for the Canadian company, they also develop. They work in naval engineering as well. So it's more of maritime or marine or naval engineering kind of work. So sonar is used across the domain. Yeah, subsea. You're laying a transatlantic cable, you might need this. You're laying an export cable from your offshore wind farm to bring electricity back to the coast. You might use, you have to use sonar for that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks again. We have a transition now for 5 minutes, so if you want to change rooms, we are to change rooms in 5 minutes. We continue the next talk.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a nice day. Thank you for the adapter mic.
Is this your adapter?
No, it's mine.
I can try with the USB-C. Yeah. It works directly. Let's see. Ah. Is there storage in there? No, I don't think so. I hope not. No, it's not supposed to be stored. Ah ja. Ja, jetzt
Hochsicherheitstrakt.
Ja.
Also, ich wüsste nicht, dass dann Storage drin ist, das ist einfach...
Das ist auch nicht schlimm. auf dem Rechner ist nichts super Vertrauliches. there was a pointer. You think I can use it?
Probably, if you can.
Yeah.
If you can
It works, but
if you can operate it. So
yeah,
that's your microphone.
That's the microphone that works.
Yeah, that's about. That's what I need to know.
Perfect.
Let's get started. So we continue our session, talk number 3. So we go from environment. It was a little bit different topic, but it's about radar. So Manuel Jorgensen will talk about his findings where does large-scale hybrid radar data generation enabling deep learning-based radar perception. Okay, that's quite a title, but it will be very interesting.
So, welcome to my talk. Shortly to me, I'm a PhD student with BMW and the University of Erlangen. And now I'm at the end of my 3rd year, and what I came up with, I will show you now. So, basically, the challenge was how can we use deep learning in the domain of radar, and how can we industrialize it so that we can use minimal user intervention and labeling to have deep learning in our products. So let's get started on why we need radar. So you have a scene on the left, you can see the camera image, on the right you can see the radar image. That's processed radar image, so we go from spectrum to this representation. And maybe you spotted it, maybe you didn't. There's a cyclist. And you can see on the camera image, it's quite hard to distinguish the cyclist from the environment. But on the radar image, it's quite clear. And keep in mind, with a radar sensor, we can do that up to 100, 200 meters. And we can do that in foggy conditions, if we get blinded by upcoming traffic, in rain, and also in the night, if the cyclist isn't well lighted. So let's start on some signal processing basics. What essentially happens in a radar sensor is we have on the left side we have a spectrum, which is essentially electromagnetic waves which we can measure. And from that spectrum, we perform a thresholding, and everything which is above a certain threshold is counted as a target, and everything below isn't. That comes with the problem that we may not see a target which is there, but we cut it off. So the opportunity which arises is if we would take all this data and put it into a machine learning model, we may be better in generating a picture like this. So that is the opportunity of deep learning in the radar domain. And also what we can do is we can, if we have a large scale database, we can evaluate different radar sensors in different configurations. And yeah, the deep learning part I already told you. So how can we do that? There are some current approaches. We either can annotate raw data by hand. You saw the raw data. It's very time consuming. You need much knowledge about the radar and stuff, so it's costly and it isn't really feasible. The other thing is, as soon as you labeled one data set of raw data and you want to have another radar sensor because it performs better different stuff, you can't transfer the annotations you made for one data set with one physical radar. So maybe we can solve those problems with simulations, with physics-based simulations. We can do that, but the problems which arise there are you need to know all the material properties. So let's say you have a 3D environment where you simulate your radar signals. You can do that, but you need to have the material properties of everything in those environments. That's quite challenging and also quite costly. The other problem is you struggle with scenario variety. So on the one hand, you have the problem that in engineering a radar sensor, you're interested about the unknowns, or the unknown scenarios. So you can't really engineer them, you need to drive them. So that's why we came up with a new method to tackle those challenges, which is essentially a hybrid approach between we are measuring and we are simulating. So what we did is we have a large database from training scenarios, which you can see here. And what we did is we assumed that all those processed data points are in fact physical scatter points. So what we already have there is material properties, we have scenario variety, and all the other stuff. The trick is that we use a high-resolution sensor to simulate the spectrum of a low-resolution sensor. So we're doing a kind of subsampling in the spatial domain. And what we then can do is we can synthetically generate and simulate our raw data, and we already have the annotation because we know what we put into the simulation. So basically that fixes all those problems. Sure, there are new problems which come with it. It's not as perfect as if you do a whole detailed simulation, but it works, and we can use it to train neural networks. So one last bit of information until we dive into the processing bits and the challenges I had with Python. So this is basically a whole processing chain from our real-world scenarios. Then we compute this. So this is simulated, this is real-world. We can compute this for a digital twin for a radar which is interesting to us. And then we can process this here. So from our simulated spectrum, we can process in the range and Doppler domain. So we have distance and we have relative velocity. We can process in the angular domain, in the horizontal angle and also the vertical angle. How does this look? So we're starting with a raw spectrum, which doesn't, it's not really interpretable for humans, but we can do FFTs. So with the FFTs, we can extract information like distance, like relative velocity. We can then do beamforming, which is basically also an FFT, but in the spatial domain. And what we can get from that is this representation, which you saw beforehand. So this is the whole processing chain. The simulation takes place here, and also the processing I integrated in my framework so that you can use input data for your machine learning model at different stages. So let's start, or the project started with me trying to figure out how I will structure the software. And the structure I came up with is quite simple, but it's for this kind of task, it's very nice. So basically, we have files which we can always, and like data types, data files which we can always save, and we can do the process step by step. So at first we generate just an environment and we save it. Then from that generated environment we can simulate different radar models until different stages of complexity of processing. And then we can save that again. We can use that file to reiterate and do all kinds of things. The good thing about this is that it's quite modular, and if you wanted to do something in between, you can, because it's saved and you can just use the saved checkpoint, so to say. So that brings us to our first point, data handling. I chose HDF5 for data handling because when I started, I didn't know exactly that I will use Python. I thought maybe, I use MATLAB. So HDF5 is quite nice because of its cross-platform compatibility. You have structured data, and also so you can save essentially your data, but also metadata. So, for example, you can save your wavelength. You can save the space between your antennas and stuff like that. Also, you can access different parts of your data very efficient, because you can say, okay, I just need that for my model training, so I only access this. And also, it's quite performant because you can compress data, you can do chunking and parallel access from multiple threads. On the right hand side, you can see an example how my data is structured. So I have the environment data, which is basically the speed of the car, all my ground truth data. I have the parameters, which I mentioned, wavelength, stuff like that, and the data itself, which I generated. And also, there was a later edition. That one is quite structured. I use an object to call all those parts. The research thing is just so that I can quickly save something and later use it. So, to talk about performance of my framework. The thing is, with radar simulations, it's computational super heavy. So let's say we have about 5,000 targets. We have 192 antennas, which is quite common for high-resolution radar in the automotive sector. We have 56 chirps, which is the relative velocity you can measure, and you have samples per chirp. So what that says it's 252 billion operations per frame, and one frame is 20 milliseconds. And radar is sending about 20 times a second. So it's quite computational. It's hard. So surely at first what I thought, okay, I can approach it like this. I have nested for loops, and I iterate over the chirps, over the antennas, over the samples. Problem is, it works for about 10 targets, and then it doesn't work anymore. So maybe you already see the solution to the problem. We can use matrices and we can use matrix multiplications. So essentially what I did, I built it in NumPy at first, and that already accelerated it heavily. But still, the problem was not heavily enough. So I did some research and stuff, and I found that you can use QPy, which is essentially CUDA-enabled NumPy, which works great. So for the example I mentioned, with the 5,000 targets, processing it in QPy, it takes about 1 to 2 minutes. Processing it in NumPy takes 18 hours. So that's the performance gain you can get from in a scenario like this. So keep in mind, if you have a problem like this, QPy or matrices with NumPy, yeah, that's cool. So yeah, it's parallel processing. I can use the GPU. What I did is I batched the antennas, so that the problem is that quite fast you get to the limits of your GPU and of your VRAM. So try to batch it, and in every simulation I do it by hand, but that's not a problem. You can choose the batch size, and then it works. And the cool thing also is the framework through this trick works on CPUs. That thing has a GPU, but it works on CPU laptops and on GPU systems. So if you have like a smaller scenario you want to simulate, you can do that also on CPUs on normal laptops. So the next thing I built, because I wanted to engineer deep learning models, I wanted to engineer data, signal processing models, I needed a visualization framework. And it's also one key point I want to tell here, because visualization is key. It's key. So what I did, I built a visualization framework which can visualize every part of the signal processing chain. So that's the GUI I created. One trick I used to keep it more modular: every window you can see on the right side, or every window I'll show you, you can choose from a drop-down menu. So you don't have fixed buttons, you just have a drop-down menu, and it's scalable. I think at some point it could get confusing, but if you're like in the 20 to 30 window range, it's fine, and it's very scalable. So here you can see the ground truth data, here in a bird's eye view, here in a 3D scenario view, and here you can see the data structure, which is also clickable and stuff. So next point is the range Doppler map, which you can visualize. I talked about this here, in yellow, you can see basically the targets, and that's the response from the environment to the signal you sent. Then you have the spatial domain. Basically here, that's the representation what the radar sees in a bird's eye view. From like, here's 0 meters, here's about 120 for this radar, I think. And this is the representation if you make a cut like this, in elevation and azimuth, which are essentially the angles in horizontal direction and vertical direction. And here you can see basically, I don't know if you can see well. If you're interested, on my laptop you can see it better. So just hit me up and we can talk about this. And for all the processing peak finding techniques, we also built some windows where you can see what the algorithm is doing with the range Doppler map, for example. And that's the output yeah, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, if you're interested, come and talk to me. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this. So that was it from my side. Thank you, and if you have questions, either now or yeah, I'm happy to talk about it later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I missed that this was only 20-minute talk. Officially over, but if you have questions and you want to sacrifice a few minutes of your precious lunch break, then you're free to ask questions now. Any questions? Yeah.
Really cool presentation, Mamu. I was wondering that when you are using physics-based simulations to generate the synthetic data, how do you handle the noise into it? Like you were showing that equation, you have antennas, so like sensor noise and propagation effects, the noise due to the propagation of radar. How do you handle that?
Yeah, so I have a statistical model for noise. So that's a right question. So the thing is about my my approach is that essentially radar signal processing removes clutter or removes noise from the data. When I simulate it, I need to re-simulate the noise. That's what I do with a statistical clutter model, which is essentially you have your normal targets, which are like the balls you saw, the points you saw, and what you can add for clutter is basically the same, just in a random distribution. Yeah, and I do that.
I just wanted to ask like a very simple question. You mentioned chirps. So what is a chirp? Because I'm from my side, so.
Yeah, the thing. I have a backup slide. To explain that it's quite a bit of time, but you can see here what a radar essentially does is it sends frequency chirps, and the frequency chirps are reflected, and then you mix them here. So the sent chirp with the received chirp, you can mix them, and what you essentially get is this. So you have those chirps, and your receiving signal looks like this. Okay, so it's basically from 77 gigahertz to 78 gigahertz, and you get a reflection. And if you now mix the reflection with your send signal, you get for each target like a constant frequency, and that constant frequency directly corresponds to a range, for example. So, and if you make that further, you can from the differences in your phase of the signal. So those are the targets, and from the difference in the phase, you get angle, you get relative velocity, and it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the talk. I have a question about, you were talking about the radar, and my question is, why not LiDAR?
It's expensive. so as the LiDAR sensor is about 100 times more expensive than a radar sensor. So only our flagship model has a LiDAR sensor in it. There are different technologies and stuff, but radar works very well, and also in complement to cameras, right? So for level 3 driving, do you know what level 3 is? There are different levels of automated driving, and level 3 is basically the user just needs to sit there, you can watch YouTube and stuff. For those automated driving levels, you would need the LiDAR at the moment. But for everything below, you don't use it.
One more short question at the end. Would that approach work for the target, which surface is not perpendicular to the ray?
Yeah. So the thing is that the general radar, you always get a reflection of a radar sensor. Even like those planes which aren't visible to radar, they have like a very small radar signature. It's very small, so small that you can't distinguish it from clutter, but you always get something back from your radar signal. There are moments where it doesn't work as well, but essentially everything has a radar signature and returns back your wave. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this interesting talk. So since people went over to the lunch break, it seems like it was a good quality talk. Now we find our way without radar over to the lunch, and we meet again after 1.5 hours lunch. Thank you.
Den willst du wieder zurückhaben? Das ist wichtig. Weil ich habe nur USB-C dran in meiner Kiste und wenn ich habe immer ganz viele USB-Sticks, die gehen nicht dran.
Yeah. So that's exactly now the idea is to use machine learning because, for example, if you have small objects near larger objects. So for example, you have a user case that somebody is changing their tire. You have the car or truck, you're changing the tire, and you're on like the traffic. That's a scenario, but it works that you can distinguish those two, but it's not easy, and that's why the idea is to use machine learning, because then it should if it's in the data, it should find it. So that's
we have the same problem with target voters.
Yeah.
We cannot separate both intent together. So
yeah, basically. So when we talk about sonar,
it's the same.
Basically, it's the same principle. Yeah, and also your synthetic aperture. Yeah, it's the same thing with radar.
Nowadays we are using LiDAR as well as
Yeah. For some, like, if you're using it in science or in research, then you don't care. Because one time it's more expensive, but we built 2 million cars.
Production.
You can't.
The production scale is a very different thing.
Yeah.
It's the same with us. For example, with experiments, it works good, but when you deploy it on when you're doing like real-time detections, it's a very different problem.
This is interesting stuff. Exactly, yeah.
To make a more fine resolution, resolution, more frequency.
Exactly.
And it doesn't impact body life.
Oh, okay.
It's not like energy transfer to the object. It is.
Yeah.
It's very less.
Okay.
It's the same like a bat.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Reflects back and it sees. It doesn't impact.
Oh, then I missed it.
like took like my card. Because I wanted to know, was it just like me being an idiot, or it gave me like some solace to see that there was actually something wrong with the stairs?